Hi, this is my exit pass for Module 1, learning about neuroscience in the classroom and its implications for teaching. So as I was reading through the modules and the website, Neuroscience in the Classroom, I came across a lot of information and reminders about Gardner's multiple intelligences. And that just kind of reminded me of a recent workshop I attended where the presenter denounced the use of teaching only to a child or an individual's specific identified learning style. And going through school and my first year teaching, somehow I had developed the misconception that a learning style is on the same level as intelligence, multiple intelligence, and one of Gardner's intelligences. So hearing this, I was kind of surprised, but after looking at the research and the readings from Module 1, I found that research supports this, and Gardner himself has written an article about this. So that's the article that I chose to use for my exit pass. And it's an article, like I said, by Gardner, where he talks about the differences between his multiple intelligences and learning styles, and how not one person has just one learning style or just one multiple intelligence. They all kind of, each person has many strengths that they use to help them learn and gain new information and to apply that information in future experiences. So, just reviewing myself, I reminded myself of the many intelligences that Gardner has listed, being linguistic intelligence, logical, mathematical, musical, bodily kinesthetic, spatial, interpersonal, and intrapersonal, and most recently he listed an eighth intelligence, which is naturalist, and he says there may be up to 10 that he hasn't named them all. Like I said, as educators, we've had this misconception for a long time that we can reach students by figuring out their specific intelligence. And a lot of times at my school I hear about, oh, that child, they're a visual learner. Or I've even identified myself as maybe a visual learner in the past. But now, learning this, I know that it's not one specific way that each individual learns, but rather a combination of multiple ways of gaining information and being able to apply it. So within the articles I read on the Neuroscience in the Classroom website, I came across an article in the first section on multiple intelligences by Dr. Joanna Christodoulou, and she talks more about this fact and just how educators can better serve their students as they work to figure out how the student can best learn the information and apply it through activating many areas of their brain and many applications that they can demonstrate their learning through. So, as I previously stated, it has been misconceptualized that multiple intelligences are interchangeable with learning styles, and I myself have considered these two to be the same thing. But in the article that I read by Gardner, he explicitly states that we cannot consider these one and the same because a child might be considered to have right brain learning style or he even states a learning style as impulsivity. And that's not necessarily how we would teach that child. Maybe if we categorized a child as being very impulsive, we might not teach them impulsively, but we might not also teach them the opposite of that, being very structured or teaching reflectively. So it's important to note that multiple intelligences and learning styles are very different, and there can be a number, maybe even an unknown number of learning styles that children have. So Gardner states another problem with people applying his theory of multiple intelligences, and that is that researchers have tried to identify learning styles and then teach children as a one-size-fits-all approach. And this is where the research that I had heard of at the conference I went to recently came in. And the presenter, like I said, stated that there was a study conducted where teachers were told that their specific group of students had a specific learning style, and the teacher designed lessons to meet that learning style. Where in another group, the teacher was told the wrong learning style that the children had been identified with, and the study looked at both of these groups. And what they found was that the teacher who had been misinformed about her students' learning styles, her students actually performed better on the same assessment that was given to both groups. So that just kind of helped trigger my new understanding that teaching to a child's specific learning style, whether it's identified correctly or not, does not necessarily benefit the child. They actually perform better if they are taught through multiple modalities. Maybe they are a visual learner and they've been identified as that, but if you teach them through tactile experiences and auditory experiences as well as visual experiences, they will have a better, more well-rounded understanding of the information that they're learning. And just thinking about that helped me to better understand the information presented by Dr. Todd Rose through our presentations from Module 1. And he helped me to identify the names and the different parts of our brain that we use to process specific information. And that was that sensory information taken maybe through tactile learning experiences comes through the parietal lobes, where we take in information and we process it. How we gain auditory information and process it through our temporal lobes. And finally, he talked about how our visual information is processed through the occipital lobe. And more specifically in that area, I learned that the different types of information, whether it be tactile, auditory, or visual, is processed in different ways depending on the type of information. And more specifically with the visual information, the ventral stream analyzes things according to the shape, color, and it uses our memories to help identify objects. Whereas the dorsal stream helps us to understand what an object is and where it is in space. So that's just a specific example from the visual or occipital lobe information that comes in. So back to Gardner's multiple intelligences. He suggests that there's strong evidence that we have each human being, each individual has a wide range of intelligences, and that the strengths in one intelligence doesn't necessarily indicate a weakness in another. Rather, we can have multiple strengths in multiple intelligences. And we all have what he calls a jagged profile of intelligences. He, as an educator himself, gives us 3 takeaways from his article. and his findings over the years from his research on multiple intelligences. The first is that by individualizing teaching as much as possible, instead of teaching to a one-size-fits-all type of approach, helps each individual student better learn and become more comfortable with the information presented, and in turn learn more effectively. This brought me back to recent learning on the Universal Design for Learning approach and using a Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, in lesson planning and in presenting information to your students. So by using a UDL approach, you can meet all students' needs because you're catering to the students with the most specific and most extreme needs in your classroom. And by catering to them, you can meet the needs of all students. And I look forward to learning more about UDL in this course. Similarly, by individualizing your learning, you will help students to engage their emotions to become better learners. And in the Neuroscience in the Classroom website, I learned a lot about how emotions are critical for good learning, and that, as Professor Abigail Baird stated, the more emotional, personal, exciting, engaging, and pertinent you can demonstrate information, the more engaged student brains will become. And this in turn leads to productive individuals. And one other area of emotions that I found on the Neuroscience in Education website was the area of empathy. And I had never considered empathy to be a great tool for learning. But I saw through multiple examples how empathy puts students in another's shoes while helping students activate prior learning and prior experiences to in turn create their own new learning experiences, making meaning from another living person's voice. Alongside UDL, I saw some information that helped remind me of the research I've seen on UDL and how normal has really recently been found to be a very relative term. There are no normal children, no normal individuals. We're all quite unique, and there are specific ways in which we have strengths learning and strengths demonstrating our understanding. I loved seeing the Gallaudet University example where they've created their own universal design for learning in simple things in their building, like the doorbell outside the professor's office to indicate someone's at the door, the types of windows, the types of curves they use in the hallway, how they make their hallways wider to allow students to walk side by side as they're communicating through sign language. Just things like that to create an optimal learning environment for all of those students and to remove the distractions and remove the obstacles for them. And that's ideally what we want to do in the classroom, is to remove all obstacles, whether they be for attention, things that are distracting our students, to create the optimal learning environment. And using students' multiple intelligences and different learning styles to help engage them in the learning can also help remove those barriers and create an environment where learning can take place. Gardner also suggests that we pluralize our teaching and teach important material in several ways, not just one, just like we have learned through UDL. In this way, we can reach students who learn differently and present materials in various ways so that understanding will be likely to occur. As I talked about previously, using multiple modalities for teaching is something that I found to be effective in my own practice, and so that students, no matter what their preferred learning style is, they can learn and they can engage in learning with their tactile senses, their vision, and their auditory senses, so that learning can occur through multiple ways. And the more we introduce topics or learning, the more likely it is students are able to apply it to their own lives and engage in it themselves. Finally, Gardner suggests that we drop the term styles. It's confusing us and it's confusing our students. Rather, we should use intuitive teaching. And remember that the brain is not set. Students don't have set ways that they must learn. Especially in children, the brain is very placid and it's able to change. There was once a misconception that students could be right brain thinkers and left brain thinkers, as Siri Fiske stated in Neuroscience in the Classroom. Well, we are finding that's not at all true, especially based on the implications from Nico and Brooke that we got to visit and really get to know through Neuroscience in the Classroom. We found that all brains are different and that one teaching style, one approach, one design will not succeed with all learners and may not even succeed with an individual learner. We need multiple styles of learning. What a teacher imagines will be easy can be difficult. We need to come up with multiple ways to communicate information to students and help them to experience learning rather than just take it in. Because through that experience, they're creating learning and they're creating memory where they can go back and access that information and have it more concrete to them than just receiving the information, being told the information. And like I previously stated, a child's brain is remarkably plastic. It molds and it changes, it's malleable, but inefficient. And an adult is less malleable. So I might have a specific way that I think about adding or multiplication, whereas my students, they might be able to consider many different ways that they could imagine or think about an addition problem. And it's important to allow students to explore those different ways rather than teaching them the one way that you know and that you're set in. Maybe you're more efficient, but it's important to let students explore and create experiences with their learning. Finally, I'd like to conclude with this. It's important that we let children try and engage. Kids will find a way to adapt and engage in their strengths. If we start from a place of strength, students will develop confidence to be able to learn and have experiences where learning can take place. And finally, we must make experiences authentic for students so that they can engage in authentic learning and create memorable experiences that they can go back to and use as they apply their learning in the future. Thank you.